Hello everyone! Happy Tuesday! I have to say my whole life is about two things, the sea and the space. And many people influenced me during my life, but surprisingly I owe the most to my grandfather Joseph, who was nicknamed Rosso with the weird Slavic/Venetian twist which sounded more like Roscio, because he was ginger when young. And yeah, a lot of people were claiming he has no soul, but he loved me and that's all it matters. Haters gonna hate. So he was famously on Dubrovnik destroyer traveling to Marseille in October of 1934, and my dad, who was born 4 years later, were both from Kirk, or Veia in Italian, the northernmost Adriatic island. In the early 60s, my dad served as a librarian in a Danube-based river battalion, or flotilla for that matter, which was an oddity on its own. The commander asked him how long will it take to make an inventory of the fleet's library, and my father calculated as many days as there were by the end of his military service. He was a hard worker, but he was also smart. Me, I was blessed to be born in the capital, but still I did my military service at Navy UDT's base at the largest fortification made by Austro-Hungary on the Adriatic coast at the island of Brioni Minor. Yes, that Brioni, where in Roman times the islands blossom, and the period has left us a number of impressive architecture. The base was right across Old Harbor Pula, where the famous Colosseum is. Anyways, not that I was special forces or something, just a lowly cook. Yeah, remember that? It's a fun quote, regardless of how exorbitantly unpopular the under siege guy is today. So, I remember stories from my grandfather about his adventures in the Eastern Mediterranean and else. I don't know if there is a place on this planet he did not sail to, and the island of Crete was in his stories as well. Well, just above Crete, where I have a good friend, a poet Babis, which I have been planning to visit for the longest time, and the visit of the Antikythera shipwreck together with the adventurous voyages of my grandfather might be the perfect excuse. On the Crete's northwest side lies a small island of sponge hunters and fishermen, a tiny rock in between Crete and the Peloponnesian Peninsula, Antikythera. Long time ago, a Roman ship traveling from Asia Minor to Italy sunk there in a storm, and this is where they find the mysterious shipwreck many centuries later. The actual land area of the island is small, only something like 20 square kilometers. And just like in the many other places in the Mediterranean, the population is in decline, so in the recent past, the idyllic Greek island was looking for residents and wanted to pay them to move there. The island is strategically placed between the Greek mainland and Crete, and it served as a crossroads for traders, sailors, and invaders from antiquity to the mid-19th century. As a result, it has a long, diverse history, having been impacted by several civilizations and cultures. And this is evident in its architecture, a blend of traditional Asian and Venetian characteristics. Traditions and customs influenced by centuries of coexistence of the Greek and Venetian culture. The Antikythera mechanism, considered the world's first computer, was originally discovered by sponge divers on their way back from sponge harvesting off the Tunisian coast. It was found in a Roman-era shipwreck in 1901. 1 year later, Hellenic Royal Navy investigated and found a shipwreck with bronze and marble statues, pottery, jewels, glass, and mysterious box, which later on was suspected to be gifts for Julius Caesar from the Rhodos Island. The most surprising discovery, however, was an unassuming lump of bronze recovered during the first excavation that was later found to be a complex set of interlocking gears capable of predicting the movement of the sun, moon, and several planets, as well as the timing of solar and lunar eclipses years into the future. The Antikythera mechanism is believed to be an early computer used to plan important events including religious rituals, the early Olympic Games, and agricultural activities. The man who saved the forgotten artifact after many years was the British physicist, historian, and information scientist Derek John de Solla Price. During the Second World War, when a lot of artifacts from Athens Museum were buried in the sand to save them from the German forces, it was rediscovered by Derek. Between 1905 and 1906, crucial discoveries were made regarding the Antikythera mechanism. Notably, the number 19, a reference to the Metonic cycle, and other significant numbers related to lunar cycles were found inscribed on fragments of the device. In 1974, Price published a seminal paper titled Gears from the Greeks. This work referenced quotations by Cicero suggesting that mathematician Archimedes might have laid the groundwork for the Antikythera mechanism. Price's research marked a significant milestone in understanding this ancient device. Price not only saved the Antikythera mechanism but also reconstructed the giant clock in the octagonal tower of the winds in Athena prior to that. He famously said that discovery of the Antikythera mechanism was such as finding a combustion engine in a Tutankhamun grave. Also, another British, Sir Arthur Clarke, said if the ancient Greeks had understood the capabilities of the technology they created, then they would have reached the moon within 300 years, and we would be probably exploring stars by now. Well, probably even further if the Ionian culture evolved in a linear fashion. The Ionians rejected superstitions that emphasized observation, laying the groundwork for scientific investigation. If not for various types of historical failures, we could have entered the industrial period thousands of years ago. So back to Antikythera. Jacques Cousteau called the device more valuable than the Mona Lisa, and it wasn't once I heard someone term it the Titanic of the ancient world, which doesn't work at all. It is a scientific insult in a way. Titanic doesn't even come close to the significance of the ancient device. As Tony Freed stated in a BBC documentary, anything from ancient Greece shouldn't have gear wheels. He continues, it is a dedicated calculating machine and it uses bronze gear wheels to calculate the cycles of the cosmos, the sun, the moon, the planets against the stars. It's a calculating machine that could demonstrate how you could look ahead, say, what's the position of the moon going to be in 5 years' time? You turn the handle and it would immediately tell you when. It's a massive step forward in the history of science and technology. And it's all fascinating. Unfortunately, Price died in 1983, and this is when Michael Wright, young curator at Science Museum in London, takes over. He said, the mechanism for driving these planet pointers is almost wholly lost. We have to use our imagination to figure out what is missing, and there are two ways of doing it. Furthermore, he explains because of the difference between heliocentric and geocentric mechanics / motion, quote, geocentric model doesn't show what you see in the sky, so we have to find a way of explaining this bizarre motion of the planet. I'm showing how I've built in this model, and what I've done in the second model is slightly different and actually rather better, but the same in principle. What is really important, especially for those who are criticizing Michael's contribution to the research, he said, I built this in the first instance really as a demonstration of what was possible, rather than an attempt to reconstruct what was really there. That's fine, let's go a little back in time again. So, grain ships would depart from Rome. They were among of the first luxury liners. The rich would set sail in the spring, travel to Egypt, and see the monuments. Then, at the conclusion of the season, they board a ship with hundreds of tons of grain to bring back to Rome to feed the growing population. Sometime in the 1st century, a rich Roman citizen or general on Rhodes loaded a giant boat with stolen Greek treasures. The ship headed for Rome, but it sunk in the stormy Ionian Sea near Crete. Among statues, ceramic vases, coins, and earnings, there was a mostly bronze artifact with 82 parts and 30 to 40 gears, which was knowledge that was very close to 16th century science. After they observed triangular teeth and Greek inscriptions on the artifact, they dubbed it the Antikythera mechanism. The estimated age of the Antikythera mechanism is believed to be between 150 BC and 100 BC, but a later study suggests it could have been constructed around 205 BC, just 7 years after the death of Archimedes. The device, found as a corroded lump of metal, was recognized as a significant archaeological find and later divided into three main fragments during restoration. The restored mechanism is currently showcased at the National Archaeological Museum of Athens, divided into 82 separate parts. And it was Valerius Thais, who was actually born on Kythera, a Greek archaeologist who made initial significant contributions to the study of the Antikythera mechanism. He was the first to study this ancient marvel. Valerius identified a gear wheel embedded in one of the pieces, marking a crucial discovery in understanding the complexity and significance of the mechanism. His pioneering work on this device and his research in Kythera, Antikythera, and Thessaly have been recognized for their importance in shedding light on ancient technology and archaeology. The wreckage site has since yielded a variety of artifacts, including 3 life-size marble horses. The fourth one is still down there somewhere. Jewelry, coins, glassware, a 7-foot-tall Colossus statue of Heracles. Later on, they also found a marble head of a bearded male figure, a marble plinth with the lower legs of another statue, 2 human teeth, several pieces of the cargo ship's equipment, a bronze statue dubbed the Philosopher, a bronze lyre, more marble and bronze statues, and scattered human bones from at least 4 different people. Among the stories built up around the wreck is that it might have carried a young bride and her dowry on her way to her wedding. But Brendan Foley, a marine archaeologist involved in the excavation of the ancient Greek shipwreck, said, "We have no evidence of that. It is just a nice story we tell each other." A logical conclusion is these are treasures, high-value goods traveling from the Eastern Mediterranean through the Aegean to the growing center of Rome, but we don't have actual proof of that. The calendar found was most likely Corinthian or from Epirus, Rhodes, and the wreck was probably in 65 BC, although some sources do not agree. So, what about researchers? Well, in 1954, Jacques Cousteau conducted a survey of Abu Dhabi waters on behalf of British Petroleum, but his team also found time to assist an Antikythera shipwreck site. They recovered hundreds of artifacts and the remains of 4 people. The artifacts included items like ceramic jars, bronze and silver objects, and even the giant head of Hercules. Jacques Cousteau's team was supervised by the Greek archaeologists Kolonas and Maria Saftanaiou, now Mrs. Petropolakou, who was a member of the staff at the National Museum and provided assistance during the exploration. Additionally, in 1976, Cousteau's team used a large suction pipe to collect sediment and precious artifacts from the seabed at the wreck site. His television program, Diving for Roman Plunder, popularized the wreck for a new generation. Examination of hull remains suggests that the planks, like thick even in a shrunken state, 11 centimeter thick, come from a ship that was 15 to 20% bigger than any wreck of similar age. The only wrecks that come close to that size, according to Brendan Foley of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Massachusetts, were the pleasure barges of the Emperor Caligula discovered in Lake Nemi in Italy in 1920s, and later these barges were destroyed in an Allied bombing raid during the Second World War. Foley, who is also a marine archaeologist involved in the excavation of the ancient Greek shipwreck, said, "I have personally investigated 40 or 45 shipwrecks throughout the Mediterranean, and I have never seen one like this. It is full of luxury goods. It is an enormous ship, massively built and built of the highest quality material available in the 1st century BC. And as National Geographic points it out, what drives astronomers to ask, "What's out there?" and oceanographers, "What's down there?" Despite covering 71% of the planet, only 5% of the ocean has been explored. The discovery of the Antikythera mechanism, just like archaeological findings in Karahan and Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, are turning the history we know upside down. The portable Byzantine sundial calendar, or the second oldest geared mechanism in existence, doesn't even come close to Antikythera complexity. Dr. Alistair Godfrey's role in Antikythera mechanism research involves manufacturing a handmade version of this ancient Greek marvel. But he wasn't the only one, far from that. Wright is a mechanic guy, and he was interested in price work, but he realized that there is so much more to discover. He built a crude tomography machine so he can start separate the image in 3D, and then he built what he saw out of brass. Then he managed to assemble the so-called Blade Runner, an 8-ton X-ray 3D machine they shipped to Athens. Some scanning was done in the 70s, but it wasn't until 3D X-ray technology came along that they could separate the parts or the gears out. It was astonishing because it was not only showing us all the gear wheels in 3D, but it showed us all these new inscriptions in the fragments as well. Out of that data has come all the breakthroughs in recent decades. Hewlett-Packard got involved as well with scientist Tom Malzbender with the help of Dan Gelb, and they were both developing a technique how different materials respond to light, and he was doing that initially for lifelike computer graphics. Each photo was mapped with 50 different lights so you can see all the details in the device. Swiss oceanographer Jacques Picard and Navy veteran Don Walsh descended in Trieste for nearly 5 hours to reach the bottom at 11 kilometers in 1960. And with today's technology, diving where Antikythera wreck is should be a piece of cake. It's roughly 50 meters below the surface of the water. And with today's ROVs, or remotely operated underwater vehicles, it should be really easy. Vessels or vehicles are already in use to perform underwater observation, inspection and physical tasks such as valve operations, hydraulic functions, and other general tasks within the subsea oil and gas industry, military, scientific, and other applications. For instance, divers from my former Brioni Minor 4th unit were not only blowing things up, but did some fantastic engineering work as well, like building bridges and so on. ROVs can also carry tooling packages for undertaking specific tasks such as pull-in and connection of flexible flow lines and component replacement. Our knowledge of the ocean is surprisingly thin. Only 5% of the ocean has been explored, with just 0.05% of the ocean floor mapped at the highest resolution. The entire ocean floor has been mapped, but only to a resolution of 5 kilometers, limiting our detailed understanding. The times has changed, but it wasn't always this easy. When they discovered the wreck in 1900, it was Captain Demetrius Kontos in command of a crew of sponge divers who were on their way to Tunisia, but they stopped at Antikythera because of the bad weather. They almost ended up on the bottom just like the ancient ship. When the weather got better the next day, they tried their luck by diving in, and one of the crew members surfaced bubbling about ghost women and underwater horses. At 2012, survey discovered evidence of a second wreck about 800 feet to the south of the main site. In 2015, the vessel Mikali of the Hellenic Royal Navy was specifically sent to Antikythera to aid in recovery operations, highlighting the active involvement of the Navy in these efforts. The Hellenic Royal Navy investigated the Antikythera shipwreck in collaboration with the Greek Education Ministry and sponge divers in 2017. Well, how it actually works? Well, according to some sources, like Cicero, the Roman statesman, author, and scholar, made a reference to the device in his works. It's really not clear if the mentioned device is the Antikythera mechanism, as Cicero lived roughly a century after the presumed date of the Antikythera mechanism invention. In his work Somnium Scipionis, besides other things, Cicero also mentions two spheres built by Archimedes, one displaying stars and constellations and another more intricate planetary model showing the motions of the sun, moon, and planets as seen from Earth. Archimedes died during the siege of Syracuse when he was killed by a Roman soldier despite orders that he should not be harmed. Cicero describes visiting Archimedes' tomb, which was surmounted by a sphere and a cylinder that Archimedes requested be placed there to represent his mathematical discoveries. Whatever it is, it wasn't a typical watch or navigation instrument. Measurement devices like clocks or sextants tend to have more straightforward divisions like 10 to 1 or 60 to 1. So 254 to 19, that's very unusual. Nikolaos Alexopoulos, Professor Emeritus from the Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science from the University of California in Irvine, said, "What do you see when you see the cover of this Antikythera book from the Museum of Athens? I see technology, and some of you will see art." The word technology comes from the ancient or modern Greek word technologia, techni and logos, where the meaning actually is, I make useful things with logic analysis with aesthetic value. And art, it is. The Antikythera was not put together like a modern clock with the gears separated with their spaces. Many of the gears appear to be touching each other. They move, they slide on these specials of sliders. They have the main drive wheel, which has these brackets that hold them down, completely against modern practice. The Antikythera mechanism is considered the world's oldest analog computer. The device features over 30 interlocking bronze gears that predicted lunar phases, eclipses, Olympic dates, and planetary movements. First that I heard about the apparatus was that it is based on 360 days of Egyptian calendar. It is an ancient Greek hand-powered orrery, considered the oldest known analog computer which used to predict astronomical positions as well as eclipses. Despite its complexity, the mechanism faced challenges due to mechanical inaccuracies caused by hand-built gears and friction between components. The Antikythera mechanism construction relied on ancient Greek astronomical and mathematical theories developed during the Hellenistic period. Recent research has shed light on its design, revealing inscriptions that served as a user's guide and proposing a theoretical model for its functioning based on Babylonian astronomy and Greek astronomical theories. While the exact workings of the Antikythera mechanism are still debated, it stands as a testament to ancient Greek ingenuity and understanding of the cosmos. Its intricate design and purpose make it a remarkable artifact that provides insights into early astronomical knowledge and technological advancement of that era. The mechanism operates by turning a small hand crank linked to the largest gear. This gear, visible as a four-spoke gear, is connected to over 30 interlocking bronze gears that predict the celestial phenomena, possibly including planetary location. The hand crank moved the date pointer about 78 days per rotation. The mechanism design reflected an ancient Greek understanding of the geocentric universe. Users would track celestial events by winding rotating hands on its circular face. It was made of a combination of wood and metal. This intricate mechanism was originally over a foot tall and housed in a wooden box. The Antikythera mechanism was repaired and restored through a meticulous process involving the repair of damaged gears. The procedure for repair involved cutting a slot, soldering in a new strip of metal, and cutting a new tiny tooth on it. This method was used to address issues such as missing or damaged gear teeth, ensuring the mechanism could function properly. The restoration process aimed to bring the intricate device back to a working state, allowing researchers to study its astronomical functions and historical significance. The mechanism stands out as a unique and groundbreaking discovery from ancient times. Prior to its unveiling, ancient Greek technological achievements were primarily associated with architectural achievements like the Parthenon and the Lighthouse of Alexandria. Matthias Buttet, or Butte, Director of Research and Development at watchmaking company Hublot, said, "I didn't want to be like a tomb robber to steal an idea, but rather as someone whose goal is to recreate the antique object in a contemporary form." So I wonder, was his 20 pieces only mastery really inspired by it? And think about it, that each one of them cost like a Lamborghini. It's like a super expensive watch. And how is that connected to fixed calendar proposed by Codex Eastman and its Ophiuchus? The 13 sign there on the calendar, is it there for a reason? If you look at the actual plate of the calendar, you will notice that the slice that belongs to Snake Bearer on the modern interpretation of Antikythera runs from November to mostly December, while Scorpio slice is really tiny, squeezed in between Libra and Ophiuchus. Maybe I got something wrong, so crowd, please educate me, don't hesitate to explain. Interestingly enough, the International Fixed Calendar, also known as the IFC or Cotsworth Calendar or the Eastman Plan, is a proposed calendar reform designed by Moses Cotsworth, first presented in 1902. IFC divides the year into 13 months of 28 days each. A type of perennial calendar, every date is fixed to the same weekday every year. If I was a conspiracy theorist, I would definitely see a synchronistic event right there in 1902. So also there's this interesting Saros hypothesis. So Christian Carman, an independent researcher at National Council for Scientific and Technical Research, and an honorary adjunct research professor at the Universidad Nacional de Quilmes in Argentina, he's also a member of the Commission for the History of Ancient and Medieval Astronomy, together with James Evans from Puget Sound University. And what they did, they presented this work at a conference in Leiden in the Netherlands, and the arguments were difficult because on complicated aspects of Babylonian eclipse prediction practice, many assumptions. When they announced their astonishing result, they said they sequentially eliminated possibilities to determine that the full moon of month 1 of the dial is May the 12th of 205 BC. Not any 100-year range for them, a particular day on which the Saros dial started. Tony Threet said that it is amazing how they use different methods, but they came to the same date. He said, the date agrees with the archaeology, the date agrees with the epigraphy, it agrees with epicyclic lunar theory invented by Apollonius or earlier. The earliest previous date suggested 150 BC, and general consensus is around 100 BC. And it's a very interesting date considering that we want to know who made the mechanism, and considering the date possible makers are Archimedes, Eratosthenes, or Apollonius. It's possible that Archimedes started everything and then worked together with Apollonius because apparently they knew each other, although there is no direct evidence to suggest that Apollonius and Archimedes knew each other personally. So what about the future? Well, Theotokos Theodoulou of the Hellenic Ephoret of Underwater Antiquities, which was interestingly enough founded in 1976, the same year Cousteau's team was there again, and it operates in Thessaloniki and Heraklion, says that the finds were very promising. We have a lot of work to do at this site to uncover its secrets. It is not entirely clear who will be in charge of the future missions in the area, but in the recent past, for the underwater operations of the expedition, Swiss watchmaker Hublot was a major sponsor, and later on even made Hublot Antikythera in super limited edition of only 20 pieces in 2013. Well, yeah, and the Greek government will help for sure. So, conclusion, well, it's not a big surprise knowing that the estimate value of the Antikythera mechanism in the context of its historical significance is immeasurable. The National Archaeological Museum in Athens, technicians were involved in the restoration process, which included repairing damaged gears and reconstructing missing components of the mechanism. The device, divided into 82 separate parts, was meticulously restored to a working state, allowing researchers to study its astronomical functions and historical significance. I believe that is a phenomenal starting point for the future explorations. Some of the recent underwater explorations in the Mediterranean led to the discovery of 3 shipwrecks resting on the Tunisian continental shelf, and the oldest shipwreck so far is off Turkey's Mediterranean coast, a 3,600-year-old shipwreck which was discovered by Agdenis University Underwater Research Center. This remarkable find, carrying 1.5 tons of copper ingots, is considered the oldest commercial shipwreck ever found. And also, the Adriatic Sea, with its rich history and maritime significance, offers insights into ancient trade and warfare. Roman shipwreck near Ilovik. In shallow waters near the island, a wooden merchant ship dating back to the 2nd century BC was discovered. It's crazy how close the location is to where my origins are, and I haven't never been there. Maybe something to consider before I go to Crete. And before we conclude this podcast, let's just remind you that the future might help us with different sonars, multi-beam and side-scan sonars, and other hydrographic surveys. One thing is for sure, especially knowing that we're in Anthropocene and the 6th extinction event at the same time, not only that we have to find whatever we can, but we also have to scan everything in 3D and save it for the future. Professor Emeritus from the Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science at the University of California, Nikolaos Alexopoulos said, "If we lose what we know today, it would take us 10,000 years to come back. Ancient civilizations never thought they would be destroyed. Think about that." So yeah, I guess data moons for sure, unless we got struck by religious fanaticism again, something Lucio Russo warns us about in his book Forgotten Revolution. And I will conclude with Tony's freed question. If Archimedes didn't have anything to do with it, who did? The craftsmanship of Antikythera mechanism is too precise to be the result of a lone experimenter. Whoever made it knew exactly what he was doing. We had to rethink the history of technology completely as a result of this single object. There were certainly, in the ancient world, more devices like the Antikythera mechanism. It wasn't unique. Also, the philosopher from the Antikythera wreck is not definitely unidentified or identified, but it is commonly believed to represent Philetas of Kos, a scholar and poet from the 4th century BC, who was believed to have studied the Megarian school of philosophy, which focused on paradoxes. The greatest paradox I see here is how this ancient device skipped a millennium and left us speechless just when we thought we figured everything out. Thank you for listening to my podcast for a full month now, regardless of if it was leap, anomalous, or not typical at all. Many more podcasting months are coming in the future. Stay selective. Bye.